it's one of those intangible, amorphous things, I suppose, like the quality of a feeling, the quality of the depth of a feeling, the depth of a connection. And these things are invisible, and they exist in those sort of interstitial places between science and myth, and between us.
My name is Ben Charland, and you're listening to What on Earth is Going On. My guest this week is Andy Curtis, an actor and theatre artist based in Calgary whose work has spanned over 30 years, in particular with One Yellow Rabbit Performance Company and also with Black Radish Theatre, a new company he has set up with 3 other actors in town. And recently they did a production of Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot. I was able to see that play and the next day chat with Andy about the play, about acting, about Calgary, about culture, about so many different things. Now, a bit of a warning, this conversation is not just funny, in fact sometimes it's downright hilarious, and I laughed quite a bit when I listened to it again. It's also got some explicit language and some spoilers for Waiting for Godot. Also, we talk not just about the play, but existentialism, Samuel Beckett, letting the masks go, simplicity, being on stage, what it means to be on stage, what theater means and why theater, what the meaning of theater is when it is not a commodity, redefining ownership in art, the idea that audiences may have changed, and where Andy's story may be taking him today. It's a really wonderful conversation, and I hope you take the time not just to listen to it, but to give me your feedback on this episode. Go to the website whatonearthisgoingon.ca to listen to this episode or any other, to get in touch with me by email or on social media, to give me your suggestions for future guests or future topics that you'd like to be discussed, and to just let me know what you think of this podcast and of this episode. One other thing to note, there is some background noise in this episode from the kitchen near from where we were recording, which was in a hallway of the Grand Theatre in Calgary. Andy Curtis, welcome to the program.
Hey, Ben, how you doing?
Good, how are you doing?
Awesome, man.
I've never had anyone ask me how am I doing in the opening seconds of the podcast
People
before.
suck.
People?
They're rude.
Really? It's awful.
That's terribly rude.
Yeah, extremely. After all of my previous guests can know herefore that they are rude.
You know, since
Andy Curtis says that they're rude.
Since you asked me to do this, I've been wondering how you are. Every day I wake up, fuck, how's Ben? How's Ben today? Shit, I should get in touch with him. No, we have our conversation coming up.
So we can spend the next hour talking about how I am. I'm good.
But how good? Scale of 1 to 10.
Right now?
Yeah.
I'm a 10 out of 10. Honestly, I'm a 10 out of 10 because this is my favorite thing to do. Not just talking to you, Andy.
Wow.
But talking to people.
Well, then it's
podcast.
a 9 out of 10.
It's a 9 out of 10.
Yeah.
For me or for you?
Well, perhaps both.
Did you just bring me down to a 9?
Yeah, simply by discounting me from the totality of this experience.
So nothing can truly be a 10 out of 10.
I don't think so.
Is that a way to segue into Samuel Beckett? And
Perhaps it is.
That was very clever, Andy.
Well, I'll take that.
So before, we don't have to get into Waiting for Godot right now. You're acting as Vladimir, or DD, in Waiting for Godot here, where we're sitting in the stairwell of the Theatre Junction Grand in Calgary, Alberta. It's only got a few days left, but I saw it last night. It's a really excellent production, so congratulations on that.
Thanks, man. I'm glad you were there. We're having a ball.
Yeah, it looks like you're having a ball. It looks like you guys are having a great time on stage.
Well, you know, and the whole point of it was to have a ball, really, with my pals on a piece of work that we dug. So, you know, we spent a couple of years jamming on it, getting together, and the odd Sunday here and there. You know, once every couple months.
Really?
We
before the production was in the works.
Yeah, it truly started as a sort of a dream project that Chris Hunt, who plays Godot, Estragon, for I don't know, a decade or so. We've worked together many times on other projects, and this one kept coming up. Hey, wouldn't it be fun to do? Wouldn't it be fun to do? And Godot just rose to the top. And then next thing we thought, hey, what if we ask so-and-so to just hang out and have a read? We'll just have a pot of coffee and sit around the table and just read it for pleasure.
So why is it so fun to do?
There are no, there's no looming production and all that entails. It's just purely about the idea and the piece and the words and the pleasure of the words and one another's company. Is sort of it's just getting to the essential thing about it. No constraints.
So why these words and not the words of, say, Harold Pinter or a contemporary Canadian playwright, for example? Why these words?
I think for one thing, they make me laugh. If I go back to when I was, 17, 18, and I first read the play, it was like a comedy routine to me. I didn't understand existentialism. I mean, I went to the university library and hung out there a lot in the rows and stacks of Beckett books and books on the theories about what he had to say, and they were intriguing to a teenager. But what really got me was the wordplay and the banter and the back and forth.
The games.
It's funny. Oh, and did you know, this is so cool, there's a living connection here in Calgary, Alberta, to Samuel Beckett, which is Keith Johnston.
Right, I did know that, yeah.
Yeah, the inventor of theatre sports, and he had an office at the Royal Court Theatre down the hall from Beckett, who was the more senior playwright. Keith was just sort of starting out his writing career, and they became pals. And so during the course of our rehearsal, I couldn't make it that day, but Chris and Tyrell, two of the guys in the show, went and had a great conversation with Keith, and he just confirmed a few things for us that we had been thinking about regarding the play.
Like what?
That it's more comic in nature, and that Keith said something along these lines, that to play it as miserable, to play these characters as miserable is wrong. They're trying to
keep misery at bay.
They're trying to keep misery at bay. They're filled with hope. It's each to a different degree, but so it was another beautiful connection to me, because the very first place I went on stage was at Loose Moose, and Keith's class at the U of C was absolutely inspiring to me many years ago.
Yeah, it's interesting because they keep misery at bay, and yet there are times in the play where the void comes in, where the boredom becomes real and they don't know what to do about it. What do we do now? It's almost too much. It's too heavy. And obviously many productions have the weight of the world falling upon them. But I think, I've seen Waiting for Godot a few times now, and the best ones for me are the ones that try to do as much as they can to make it as gamesmanship and entertaining as possible, because the void will always come through. It's in the structure and in the writing of the play. You can't avoid it.
You know that old adage it's some old fart theater story, I don't know, probably with some Sir guy.
Yeah.
If you cried less, perhaps they would cry more. Do you know that one?
Yeah.
It's like, I played out there, I was out there doing Macbeth, and I gnashed and I railed and I felt so deeply, and not a peep from the audience, not a tear. And whoever the other Sir was said, well, Jesus, if you cried less, they'd maybe cry more. Mm-hmm. So it in some ways, I don't know, it's a cheap and cheesy rule, I guess, but don't play the end of the play.
Yeah.
Don't play the effect that you want it to have on the audience. That's a different thing than the effect it has on you as an actor. But it was really beautiful to have Keith just remind us of that, and I think he's an authority. I give him a lot of credence. That because he said pretty much what you said. You play it light and lively to keep the void at bay. I remember when some years ago, just this thought, that the void always creeps in, as you say. It's ever present, depending on how undistracted we are, I suppose.
Right.
Because I think we distract ourselves quite well as a species to keep the void at bay.
Well, in fact, some have said that Waiting for Godot is a play that says that the meaning of life is about distracting yourself constantly, because if you don't, you will come face to face with death and nothing.
And I would argue that no, that in fact that yes, we tend to distract ourselves, but I would say that Beckett, not to have any clue really what Beckett said, but that in approaching whatever that darkness is, I've had this notion for a long time, and it's a bit of an actory bullshit kind of notion, but it's just the notion that they when you're performing, when you're on, it's like you're at a party, and hey Ben, how you doing? And you're putting on your best face and your best thing, and theater is a lot like that.
Sure.
It's like opening night after a theater show. Everybody's on their best behavior, and they're at their most charming, and they're dressed well. And then you leave the party, and crunch, 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 the snow is so loud under your feet, and it's dark, and it's cold all of a sudden, and then you get home, and you climb up your sad, lonely stairs, or you're whisked up in your luxury elevator, and you go into your place, and you stand in front of the mirror, and there's the potential for a moment where you just let all the performance go, all the masks fall, and that's who you are. And I contend that it's valuable to embrace that part of oneself, because if you don't,
but what happens if you don't? I mean, that's a good question.
What happens if you don't?
That's maybe one of the questions in the play too. What happens if you don't embrace who you really are, or that yeah?
How about this then? To use another metaphor. This from my grade 7 social studies or science teacher. Can't remember which. Mr. Alaschuk, I think was his name. So you're living on a 2-dimensional world. All you can see is a line. That's your 2-dimensional world. And a 3-dimensional object suddenly moves through your space. What do you see of it? Well, you only see a line as it passes through what you're able to see.
Right. So
how can you extend your view to take in the 3 dimensions? I think that's the question. And here, looking in that mirror by yourself, somehow you're on the cusp of that.
It's like Plato's cave.
It's like Plato's
the allegory of the cave, where there are, imagine that people are born and raised in a cave of darkness, and the only thing that they know and that they've ever seen are reflections of themselves and other objects on a wall in front of them. So all they're seeing is reality posed on a screen. But what happens if you release a prisoner and bring them out into reality, into our reality anyways? Would they understand? Would they be even able to see what's going on out here as real? And if they do, what happens when they go down and try to convince their old friends that, hey, everything you know is wrong? Everything you think is real is not real. It's a reflection on a wall. If you had spent your whole life, you'd be like, you're crazy, because you can't understand where they're coming from. And so if I see my true self in the mirror, after all the masks drop, I may not have the tools to understand it.
Is there any way you could possibly recognize it without the tools or a leap of imagination? I think.
Right. I think that's the key, the leap of imagination.
Yeah, whether you're a scientist, an artist, whatever, it's a leap to see that 3-dimensional object, to extend our vision. And somehow this notion of this sort of cognitive dissonance that we have, in your Plato's cave anecdote, when you do come outside, will you see reality or have the world's in kind of a messed up place, it feels like now, more than ever, or the same as it ever was. I don't know, but it feels pretty messed up, and people are anxious and about you name it, and never mind all the crap going down south of the border, and it, I don't know, just this inability to see what seems so patently real,
right,
to some of us.
Andy, you've given me my segue. My first question I didn't ask now until like 12 minutes into our conversation. Right, and some of the best conversations are the one where it's delayed because we get talking about something else. But I still want to give you the shot at answering the question. So it's deliberately broad to get a deliberately broad response. And maybe we've already been talking about this.
I might be deliberately narrow.
That's a good idea.
Just to mess you up, man.
Oh, what am I going to do if you're too narrow, though? Then I think we just have to end the converstion if you're too narrow.
Okay, I'm widening it. I'm widening.
Okay, it's your call, man. You answer it however you like. Take us into the depths of despair, if you will. No, Andy, what on earth is going on?
What the hell is going on? Well, that's pretty much the question right there that needs no answer. That pretty much does it. I think a lot of people are asking that. What the hell is going on? What the is going? What is going on? It's a mystery to me, and so as things get more complex, I think my nature is to retreat to simplicity. Simpler things. For example, having a conversation with you is very fulfilling to me. Exchanging knowledge,
perspective.
Perspective. Thanks. Perspective. I like.
Sorry, I just put a word in your mouth there.
No, that's
Andy. It's perspective. Here's
great.
your answer. No, yeah.
Well, I love that. Yeah, perspective. Yes, perspective.
Well, because you and I may have the same knowledge. For example, we both understand the allegory of the cave from Plato, right? We both know that. But we have a different...
you know it more than I do.
Not necessarily.
You brought it up. I didn't bring up Plato.
No.
What cave?
I'm trying to be clever. I'm trying to make people think I'm smart.
Well, I think you are clever. You got those big black framed glasses.
Oh, man. But they got like stains on them from being in a spa.
Well, that's... Really?
Yeah.
Was it a Japanese onsen?
No, Norwegian.
Okay, then fuck off.
So anyways, we both have the same knowledge of Plato. Let's say we do, okay? Let's say I'm just as smart as you are, which I know is not true, but let's just say we are. Our perspective of it is different, and here's a perspective that's different. You said a leap of imagination. I've never thought about that before. I've never thought that you could escape from Plato's cave with a leap of imagination. Plato talked about using rationality to escape from the cave, that if we just think our way out, that's the human gift. We can use our rational mind to escape from this confine. But maybe actually imagination, which is linked to rationality but it's different, may lead us somewhere and we go, oh, it's almost like doing a puzzle and assuming that something is right in order to solve it, even if you don't know that solution is correct, right? And if I assume that this leap of imagination will take me to the true place, I might actually discover that it is true. And I hadn't thought about that before. So in this conversation, we have similar bases of knowledge, but we take a new direction because of our shared linking of experience.
I love that. I don't know if this is apropos of anything. I was out at Okotoks, which is the name of a small town not too far from Calgary.
Thanks for that, by the way, because often I have to do that.
It's also the name, the Blackfoot name. I sure hope I'm getting this correct. It's the Blackfoot name of the Big Rock. The Big Rock being the size of a 4-story walk-up apartment building, sitting in a field all by itself. It's an anomaly. I visited it many times. Rock climbers go out there and practice, but it's also a very sacred thing to the Blackfoot people. I happened to be there with an elder once who pointed out the incredible pictographs on the rock. But there's two stories to how it got there. One is has been known by the Blackfoot forever, and I'm probably going to completely get this wrong. So pardon me, my Blackfoot friends. But I believe that in their mythology, the rock fell onto the back of a creature who carried it from up north to where it is now. And at some point, this creature, I don't know if it was a turtle or a bear, left the rock there. It's a beautiful story, the way the Blackfoot tell it. And I was really fortunate to. Unfortunately, I'm forgetting it. So this creature dropped the rock off, and that's where it came to be. And I think there was an origin myth about how the Blackfoot came to be related to that rock. But in their story, it came from a very specific place, a very specific mountain up north, somewhere near Jasper. Well, scientists have shown that this rock, whatever it's made of, doesn't exist around here in the locality. It came from a mountain up near Jasper.
Interesting.
So the rational scientific model and the mythological story-making imaginative model tell almost exactly the same gist of a tale.
Right.
So, there's no, I suppose it's a Jungian notion, isn't it? The bicameral mind. And I think they do work in concert. And when you leave one behind for the other, well, there's an absence.
And I think that you're actually pointing at something that is deeply wrong with our discourse, our political dialogue, our world today, is that we seem to want to privilege one story over another. And I think that the mind is not only bicameral but multicameral. For example, waiting for Godot, there are just as many explanations for what the play is about as there are people seeing it. That's kind of the point of it. That it's a puzzle that can never be fully solved, right? I can solve it for myself and I can feel confident in that. But if I try to impose my solution onto other people, then we're getting into a problematic territory because that's not what it's about. If I try to say that this is the only story of the big rock that is possible to be told, right, then I'm actually getting into troubling territory. Not just with freedom of speech, but we're actually closing the mind. We're closing the mind off to possibilities. I remember being in New Zealand and learning about the Maori mythology of the glaciers that are in New Zealand. They have very interesting beliefs about how the glaciers came to be. One of them is that a female goddess and her climbing partner, husband, whatever, he died falling off a mountain, and her tears formed the glacier, her tears of sadness. Now, that's kind of like an Adam and Eve story. I don't know if anyone believes that is literally true, right? That her tears formed the glacier.
That's another whole problem, is it? Literal belief in.
But it doesn't matter that it's literally or not literally true. Yes, it's a whole other problem of literal belief and saying, no, that only the scientific solution is the right one. Well, yes, if we're going to analyze that rock and move that rock somewhere else and try to know the provenance of the rock and look at the stars and how it fits in with the planet and whatever, okay, fine. Maybe that's the only solution that'll work. But if we're going to tell a story about the rock, we're going to bore people to tears if we're just going to talk about how the rock was migrated from that mountain near Jasper. We need to tell the more interesting human story. And that doesn't mean that one is privileged over the other. We need, by being human, I think, means to accept a multitude of stories, a multitude of explanations. And to know when one is necessary to be, I guess, privileged over the other, and one not so much. And I think that if we miss that, we get into trouble with dogma, we get into trouble in politics, and we hate the other story, because the other story is against my story. It's us and them, and the other story is challenging, attacking, illegitimately trying to subvert mine and will destroy my story. And that's dangerous, but also I think the role of the arts to tell multiple stories.
I love that. It's what the hell is going on? I'm sad in a way that science, which to me is the only objective way we can agree on external facts. It's the best system we have. I think. So if we could just agree on that. And then, have whatever your Christian myth is, or whatever your origin myth is, or your Islamic myth, truth. See, even calling it a myth would probably get me in trouble with some folks. But yeah, the privileging of one story over the other is just ridiculous to me. Ridiculous, because as you say, it's divisive. It just chops us up, I think.
Well, it chops up our mind, I think.
Chops up our mind, and it's exclusionary. It automatically excludes. I think for me, I've been deeply privileged in this context, in the notion that a few years ago I was part of a show called Making Treaty 7. We're sitting right in front of the office of the artistic director here at the Grand Theatre in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. On a beautiful sunny day, Ben.
Planet Earth, Milky Way galaxy.
Planet Earth, Milky Way. Apparently, we might be in a black hole.
Well, that'd be cool.
It's the latest nonsense from The Guardian. But I was fortunate to be a part of this production a few years ago called Making Treaty 7, which was a conciliation project. It was conceived as a conciliation, not reconciliation, because in the notion of a number of the elders that were involved in this project, there was never a conciliation in the first place to have a reconciliation. So we're still aiming at the first one.
This is the first attempt. Yeah.
This is the first attempt. So this was our little microcosmic attempt as a group of performers, theater performers, drummers, dancers, etc., to try and be together on this difficult topic of the Treaty Number 7 that was signed here between the Crown and the Blackfoot Stoney Nakoda Tsuut'ina peoples in 1877. So I was asked to be a part of this and to contribute, and it was earth-shatteringly, eye-openingly beautiful to me. One of the most profound experiences I've had in my life, which was allowed me great access to the storytellers and the myths of the peoples who have lived in this place that I've lived most of my life, who have lived here for millennia. And damn it, I feel like now a chunk of my concept of what my home meant, I didn't even know it was missing. I didn't even know it was absent. I go fishing out here to the west of Calgary. There's a lot of beautiful rivers and beautiful creeks and clean water. And I've walked on trails that I know have been walked upon, but some of them are really old. You know, some of them were before colonists, before Europeans came over here. And just to be able to open my mind a little bit to that, it's one of those intangible, amorphous things, I suppose, like the quality of a feeling, the quality of the depth of a feeling, the depth of a connection. And these things are invisible, and they exist in those sort of interstitial places between science and myth, and between us, and between cultures and individuals.
I love that, though, because to me, that what you're talking about now is the only path that we have towards immortality. And here's why I say that. When I've been in the mountains, in the Rocky Mountains before, all by myself, off the trail, middle of nowhere, and just had this sense that I was not the first to be there, right? You think you're in like a clearing in the woods, like, no one's been here before, right? Who would come this far off the trail? Who would be hiking out here, right? Especially in Canada, in Alberta, where you can go places where really not that many people go, if anyone ever goes. But people have been here for millennia, as you say.
Yes.
Someone has walked there before. And if not someone, animals have been there before.
Yes.
And I felt, even for just a moment, and this took obviously a leap of imagination, that's where I was, to connect myself with previous times and previous people, previous living things. That's the impression I get when I read a book sometimes. That's the feeling I get when watching Waiting for Godot. I'm actually in communion with Samuel Beckett, who wrote this play in the late 1940s, produced 1953 in Paris, who died in 1989, that I can be in communion with a dead person and that he's telling me something. He's giving me an impression of where he was. And that, again, that interstitial space between us, or liminal space between me and Sam all those years ago, is a profound feeling, and it means that he is immortal through me. He's not immortal through pieces of paper, because when we all die, paper obviously will die with us. It has no meaning and value if it doesn't have people looking at it. But if I read or watch his play, if you perform as Vladimir in the play, he becomes immortal through you. Christopher Hitchens used to talk about this, the famous new atheist who died in 2011. He was asked, well, wouldn't you want to believe in immortality? Wouldn't you want to believe in the afterlife? And he said, I do. I read Shakespeare. That's immortality for William Shakespeare right there. If I write something and it's read 100 years from now, that's the best immortality I can get. And frankly, that's the only immortality that I want. And that power of everlasting communion with other people is profound, but it's also rare. It's rare to find. I don't feel it every day.
No, and perhaps it's not a feeling. Perhaps that's the beauty of it, is the rarity of it, the value, the scarcity of that feeling makes it desirable and valuable, I think. My friend Michelle Thrush, an incredible actor and director, Michelle, who was part of the Making Treaty 7 project, introduced me to the notion that when she is on stage, she's not alone. She's on stage. And you know, I can't speak for First Nations Aboriginal concepts at all. So, begging your pardon, I'll just report what I think I gleaned from it. When she's on stage, her ancestors are with her, and it gives her a great strength, and she's powerful. And there are a lot of powerful performers, but I'd never heard a powerful performer be so rooted in her culture and in her family, and her ancestors are on stage with her. Like, that's powerful, man. That's so powerful, just in terms of life, not in terms of performance specifically, more so in terms of life. And that very thought, you know, I don't subscribe to a monotheistic religion in any way, shape, or form. But these ideas seem rooted in practice, in longevity. Well, not that that's a great criterion for anything, but
in lineage, maybe. Like, I feel that there's that word lineage comes into play.
Practice and practicality, and indeed a lineage, but a way of keeping memory alive, a way of a different sense of time in a way. You know, time is not an onslaught of moments approaching and passing to be gone forever, as we might conceive of it in a Western sort of fashion. It's like her people are living entities.
One thing about this conversation that I've appreciated so far is the discussion of storytelling and how important storytelling is to Andy as an actor, as an artist, as a thinker, as a citizen. Now, after the break, we're going to be talking about more in terms of storytelling, but also I ask the question, is this kind of conversation even useful or helpful to an actor, or might it actually get in the way of the work? All that's coming up on this episode of What on Earth is Going On. 60 Minutes, the American show 60 Minutes, did a bit on Tanya Tagaq recently, the throat singer, and revealed essentially that throat singing was almost extinct because it was made illegal during the residential school system, and with the Indian Act, it was made illegal. You weren't allowed to practice this. And by the time she picked it up, it was going away. Right? And she learned it I think as a kid and then as an adult. She didn't grow up with it. She learned it from family and now has brought it to the world stage. But the thing that she does when she's throat singing is the thing that throat singers have done for hundreds, if not thousands, if not tens of thousands of years. I mean, it's such a primal act that it could go to, you know, the basis of what it means to be human. People say that music is a very basic human impulse, that we've been making music for as long as we've been human, maybe longer. Animals live by rhythm, the rhythm of heartbeat, the rhythm of nature. There's a musicality to living in this world. And throat singing is very much that, but it's also ethereal. It also brings us into the clouds, into an imaginative state. But it's a real thing that she's doing that has been passed on through generations and generations. She's doing something passed on from someone she will never know. She won't know their name. She won't know what they look like. She won't know anything about them, but she will know them through the act of throat singing. And I think any performance art is the same thing. I mean, literature is kind of a high form of this, where we can overthink it. But the basic, rhythmic, physical form of performance in theater is so human, but also so generational.
Boy, and it's almost like there's no notion of ownership in it. That you don't necessarily own that the singing. You're just the bearer of it for the time being. When the time passes, you pass it on. My friends in Eahe Nakota, which is a kick butt drum group from out west of here, from Stony Nakota, their drum is called Grandfather. They call their drum the Grandfather because he speaks, and he speaks before they hit it, which is concepts I don't understand, but I want to. I want to make some attempt to understand, or at least to hear them play. But I consider these great gifts that were given to me, just knowledge, I suppose, a knowledge bundle, and I think, boy, there's so many things that we can learn from that we're immune to in so many ways. I think that we don't listen to. So I wonder sometimes if theater, beyond its entertainment value, beyond its should we go to the hockey game or the Waiting for Godot play? I think it's in many ways it's a commodity. But when it's not a commodity, what is it? What is it? What kind of information can it transmit? I ask myself. What's the point of theater? So to sort of circle the wagons back to our initial get-togethers for Waiting for Godot, Godot, Godin, it was the pure pleasure of communicating with one another and sitting with Beckett in a room in our little way. He's a towering mind that's a difficult one to penetrate.
True, but he's a towering mind who loved fart jokes.
He sure did. He sure did. He was Waiting for Godot is rife with fart jokes and bad prostates and sore feet and bunions and also
gallows humor at the same time as a very existential humor. The high and the low, like Shakespeare.
The high and the low. Yeah, the high and the low. It's poetic. It's prosaic. It's I really love how he purposefully. There's one line. Maybe I can't remember it. But just how he specifically removed anything that would allow a viewer or a reader, hopefully a viewer with his plays, the possibility of nailing it down.
Right.
Like all time references gone. The only thing we know is the inexorable day, night.
Well, we know that the Eiffel Tower has been built. That's the only reference, which is a funny one because it comes right at the beginning of the play, and they say that we used to be able to climb the Eiffel Tower, but they wouldn't accept us anymore.
And then gone.
Right, and then that's it. And then we're left in the wilderness of maybe the 20th century, I guess. Yeah.
So it's pretty inspecific. It's inspecific who they are, where they're from, what they do. There's vague memories that are always called into question. Everything memory related is in doubt. And I remember reading something years ago. Maybe it was a quote related to Waiting for Godot. It was that faith in the main is doubt. And I've thought about that here and there, and I think, well, in a way, Beckett's play is an expression of that. That let's just let that sink in.
I have faith that you're going to continue, but also I doubt that you will continue.
I doubted that I would continue, and so I didn't.
I'm going to leave that pause in there.
It's a Beckett pause.
It's totally one. Well, I think you're onto something, and Beckett was not necessarily a spiritual person, but he had a religious upbringing very clearly, and his plays are infused with religious symbolism, and obviously many people can take the Bible to analyze waiting for Godot, Godin, whatever. But also Dante's Divine Comedy, and they can use that and the symbolism that Beckett uses about hell and the divine order of things, right? But all of this symbolism is to the side. I don't have to know that stuff in order to enjoy the play.
No, you sure don't.
There's so much else that is going on. When you talk about it being so inspecific, that liberates me from having to know. Hopefully it does. I mean, there's a lot of people who will come to the play and say, I've got to know what this is trying to say to me. I got to know where this is positioned. I got to know what country road this is, what tree this is. Is it a willow? For sure. I got to know. But Beckett, I think, liberates us from, there's enough signals in there that say to us, no, you don't. No, you don't. There are many people who asked Beckett himself, is Godot God? And he said, if it was God, I would have written God. So, yeah, obviously it's related. There is a God-like aspect to Godot, as there is aspects to the rest of the play. But the play exists in its own reality when I watch it and experience it. And there's also this question of habit, too, which was you mentioned memory, but there's also habit, which was a preoccupation of Beckett. In the play, there's the quote, habit is a great deadener. There's a quote from Beckett, though, from 20 years before he wrote the play, where he wrote an essay about Proust. And he said that habit is the ballast that chains the dog to its own vomit.
Habit is the ballast that chains the dog to its own vomit.
That's right.
And at the same time, I would think those very habits are sustaining.
It's all we have. So
it's a bit of a conundrum, and I think that's life. In a sense, it's like as my pal Blake Brooker would say, we're meaning machines, and he probably stole that from somebody else. So in attempting to impose meaning on the play, what size are your shoes? Those are nice. Are they leather?
No, faux leather.
Are they?
And they're not Norwegian. I didn't take him to the spa.
Did you just get back from Norway? I'm just stopping my before I get into trouble here.
All the stuff that we're talking about is quite philosophical and deeply grained, but we're talking about meaning, and I wonder, as an actor, if this is useful to you.
To talk about?
No, not well, maybe this conversation, but are these tools that you can use, or is this stuff to be avoided bringing into the studio when you are writing, creating, developing, acting in a piece of theater?
I do think a lot of actors don't necessarily consider things other than how do I move from point A to point B, and the answer to the question, why am I saying this, is rooted perhaps in something fairly prosaic. A lot of actors are just walking meat blocks.
Are you?
Maybe that's not true. Well, probably. Yeah, absolutely I am.
But sometimes it's.
But everybody's search for meaning is different. Everybody searches or looks for meaning at whatever level of search for meaning they're on. Right. I guess. I don't know.
But I guess my feeling. So I've obviously acted before. No, it's not obvious at all. I've been an actor before. It might seem like
obvious.
Crazy.
I see you walking down the street. I go, that's an actor.
That guy's making shit up as he goes along. No, and sometimes not sometimes, all the time I overthink. I'm an overthinker. I get in my own way. I sabotage myself. If I were playing Vladimir, I would be thinking because he's the curious one of the Vladimir and Estragon. Like if some people have said that the duo in this play is knowledge and ignorance. And even though knowledge is imperfect, Vladimir at least chooses to try to figure things out, whereas Estragon is happy to, I don't need to know, I don't want to know, and I don't actually know, I don't know anything. I forget everything that happened to me. Someone kicked me, I remember that part. That's it. And for me, if I were playing Vladimir, I would go full hog into curiosity and knowledge and trying to figure things out. And I wouldn't be able to avoid it as an actor, but I would get in my own way. So I'm wondering if you feel similarly, and that if conversations like this give you the tools to do your job better, or if they actually can distract you from your job, which is, in some cases, to be a meat block getting from A to B.
I certainly like thinking about stuff and considering the deeper semiotics and what the hell are things about and how does it fit in?
Okay, you've already said fuck. You can say it again.
Oh, good. Okay. Fucking semiotics. Fuck. You'll tell me what that means later, I hope.
The fuck? Yeah, I can tell you.
Okay,
it's
good. Yeah.
It's an important conversation everyone should have at some point.
Well, when you say that you don't want to get in your own way, I don't need to go and read everything. Maybe this is just a cop out, but I think if it ain't in the play, it ain't in the play. So at the same time as I like to do whatever amount of research I do at the company there, the other company I work with, One Yellow Rabbit, we'll sit around for a week and read everything by Ezra Pound or every word that Leonard Cohen wrote, and then we'll start researching around that content, what other poets may have said about him. Not necessarily scholars or academics, but how much of that filters into the work, how much is necessary, I don't know. I ultimately default, I think, more to a simplicity. A friend of mine years ago said he plays. This is a guy who ended up playing a lot of cowboys and sort of rough-hewn sort of Western guys. I think he was on Heartland for a while, and that kind of stuff. But his thought was like acting is blood and bone and gristle. And in a way, I think that is true. That is true. Even if you're doing some heady Shaw piece, it's all in the words. You don't have to add much. You don't have to look smarter than saying the words make you look.
The work has already been done for you.
The work's already been done.
And the audience can fill the gap that hasn't been done.
Yes. So I know, there are people who are, acting is acting. You're pretending, dumb guys pretending to be Albert Einstein. Albert Einstein's pretending to be Lenny. It's like the big dumb Lenny.
The clip of Ian McKellen on the show Extras, the Ricky Gervais show Extras, where he talks about acting, and he gives Ricky Gervais a lesson in how he had to be Gandalf in Lord of the Rings, and it is exactly what acting is.
It's exactly.
So I am not Gandalf, but Peter Jackson asked me to come to New Zealand, and on the day he said, when he says action, then I pretend to be a wizard. I am not actually a wizard. And then, you shall not pass cut. And then I'm Sir Ian, Sir Ian, Sir Ian.
That's pretty much it exactly.
Yeah.
That's it exactly. It's pretend. It's pretend. And, we can go to varying degrees into that.
But can I ask you, why do you think humans love to pretend or watch other people pretend so much?
Oh gosh, that's a good one. That's a good one. Well, even when just what you're talking about a second ago, I just thought, well, it's acting, pretend. It's fun. It's fun. It's just fun. It's play. And maybe as Beckett would say in one way, it helps us pass the time, but it's just fun, and it's communal, and it's camaraderie and conviviality and pleasure, and the pleasure of our company, and that can't be a bad thing.
I think there's something about it too that I get to try on other clothes, I get to try on other shoes, I get to live at another address for a little while, and that actually psychologically insulates me from the fear of what that other is. Many psychologists have said that the whole practice of pretend for kids is to allay the fear that comes with the other, with a foreign thing, right? So we're always afraid of the dark house across the street as a kid. We're always afraid of the other side of town. We're afraid of the unknown. Well, how do you not be afraid of the unknown? You make the unknown known. How do you do that? Well, if you're going to play with it, you become the other thing. You pretend you're a ghost. Why do we love to make vampire movies and zombie movies and ghost movies or plays or books or whatever? I think it's because it's making the unknown somehow known or somehow familiar. Even if we don't know the coordinates of it, we can know what it might feel like to be a ghost. We can know what it might feel like to live in the world of waiting for Godot for a little while. Obviously, Beckett's intent with waiting for Godot, if he had any intent, whatever that word means, was more than just to, have fun exploring the unknown. Well, actually, no. Actually, I just disagree with myself, actually. I think that's exactly what he was trying to do.
You're melting.
I'm melting.
Ben, you're dissolving.
No.
Oh, no.
Can you see me anymore, Andy? I think I'm gone.
Oh, no.
Okay, you got it. It's all yours now. The rest of the show is yours.
Darn matter, antimatter. Hate that stuff.
But you know what I mean? Like, to make the unknown known.
Yeah. I do kind of... it's like like an old map where here be monsters, or we don't know what's over here.
Right.
It takes a bit of guts for somebody to go, I'm going to sail over there and see what's going on.
Right.
Whereas other people go, no, there's monsters. Don't go. Well, somebody's got it. Somebody always does. There's something pretty amazing about human beings that they do that. I suppose there's a bad side to that as well. But
what do you mean? What's the bad side?
Well, the bad side, I think, is that we, in our zeal to explore, we push some ideas too far.
Right.
I don't know, genocide, things like that, maybe.
You're melting, Andy.
I'm melting. But yeah, it's fun to pretend. It's fun to make things up. It is childish or childlike in a way. I don't think we lose our childish wonder, but we have to practice it. You
have to practice. Like, what does Beckett say in the play? Some men are born mad. All men are born mad. Some remain so.
Some remain so.
You almost kind of want to remain so. Why lose it?
Boy, exactly. And I know I feel so fortunate that I get to hang out with creative, unique individuals who use their minds, and use their minds perhaps in a way to question the things, as opposed to, I think we live in a culture that most so-called art entertainment merely confirms our previously held biases and prejudices. It just confirms it.
Well, I'm probably not going to go to a play that challenges me. I mean, not me, Ben, but I'm talking about in general. I'm not going to see stuff on Netflix. It might not even be shown to me, the stuff that's going to actually trouble me and make me think of the other side. And I'm certainly not going to go to a show that challenges me.
I think that there have been periods of time maybe where that notion of the challenging work was more readily like the 60s and 70s. I mean, there was a crazy experimental explosion in culture and music and art. Early 20th century, same thing. Things that challenged big status quos. How many surrealist artists were murdered by the Nazis, for example, or but these ideas of challenging, why would I pay $40 to go and have my beliefs challenged
and be offended
and I think, okay, we don't actually have a right now to not be offended, for one thing. Let's get that clear. The world is an offensive place, and I don't want to be offended, but
no,
in some ways I have to support the idea that people with ideas that are anathema to me have the right to spew their shit, as long as it's not fire in a theater.
Sure, and I know we're talking about this in general terms, so it's easy for me to say that I could be a bigger person by listening to the other side. What's the famous quote that the idea of wisdom is to entertain someone else's idea without accepting it. And I think that I'd have to be quite a small person to insulate myself from all offense. But the smaller I get, the more offensive, the more offendable I become. You know what I mean? And so it just becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy until I'm just an atom of which the whole universe offends that one thing.
And then you go deaf.
and then you're
if
gone.
you're not already.
If you're not already. And I think that, I mean, certainly it's dangerous. And I wonder, do you feel that over the last even couple decades that audiences have changed? Or, what do you think?
The rules of engagement have changed a little bit. Certain things that it would be difficult, for example, to put Archie Bunker on stage these days. And I think certain forms of satire and sarcasm might not be as broadly acceptable. And then I think, well, maybe satire and sarcasm are derived from a sort of particular cultural place. Maybe that is more of an English voice that is elusive to those for whom English was not their primary culture. And I think, well, maybe it makes sense then that I look more into the refinements of Mandarin. What does maybe Mandarin has no parallel in sarcasm. Maybe there's something there that I don't know that I'm missing. So I think audiences have become a little bit broader, although at the same time, from what I see of audiences, they're still primarily pale-faced folks coming to the theater. And then I think, well, maybe the theatrical tradition is rooted in a sort of more English primeness. So,
or our particular theatrical tradition.
Yes.
Like the black box stage or the proscenium or whatever, the audience in a certain format. I mean, all cultures have a form of performance, but maybe not that fit within the English or Western world version of it.
Well, it'd just be nice to mix and match more. In 2012, I think it was, Calgary was the city of culture. Was it 2012?
Yeah, I think it was 2012, yeah.
Yeah, and our pal Michael Green investigated what cultural groups exist in Calgary that don't really see the light of day beyond their community center or their weekly meeting.
Or their home.
Yeah. Or their home. And how can we get them out of the house? How can we benefit? Not because we have something to give them, but because we benefit too from knowing that. In the same way that doing Making Treaty 7 gave me the gift of a little window into a culture that's lived here forever. Those possibilities are everywhere. And man, in theater it's pretty slow to respond in some ways. The big theaters, the bigger they are, the slower they are to respond. And I think the small little companies are the most interesting. They're the most, it's the most open to contemporary stories, current stories, things that are happening now. It's so there's different scales of theater. I think the big theaters are slow behemoths that just move slowly, respond slowly, play it relatively safe,
and I think often tell a uniform story. Whereas the smaller you are, the more of a multiplicity of story you can engage with, maybe, because you're not beholden to anything. I sure think the most interesting stuff is the stuff I've seen at the High Performance Rodeo or festivals similar to that. Like your stuff's just small scale, idiosyncratic, less chefs spoiling the soup. Just one guy with or one person with an idea. To me, that's always the most interesting. Yeah.
And the most powerful, and has the most possibility for telling me or showing me something that I may have been unaware of. Whereas, as you said, larger theater, I think just confirms what I think I already know.
Well, I mean, there's an obligation if you're a big theater, whether you're to your subscribers or your donors or to the theater that you rent or own or whatever. There's an obligation to tell the story that people expect you to tell.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can get away with changing that. And that's what requires a revolutionary, visionary thinker to come in and, no, we're going to do it this way. And I'm going to show you that our new story is just as good as the old. But it's pretty hard to tell two stories at once, right? Whereas a small company can get away with doing 7 plays in a row that are all completely different. Andy, I've got one last question for you.
All right.
If we could have another hour of doing this in the stairwell of the Theatre Junction Grand with the noises from the kitchen, what would you want to dig into? Like, what's something that we haven't discussed that you would love to dig into? It can be anything.
Well, this is a pretty heady, philosophically oriented kind of chat. So maybe something lighter. Maybe something a little more. I don't know, because I know you're a smart dude, Ben. I've always appreciated that about you. That you're thoughtful. It's really great to hang out with you, even for an hour.
You too,
here, by the way. Yeah, I don't know. I know I have other interests.
Like, what's a preoccupation of yours that you can't avoid?
I'm a budding naturalist.
Oh yeah.
So
it was clever, by the way, how you phrased that.
I took part in a chat at this thing called the Genesis Center, which is for immigrants, or serves immigrants in many ways, just to help people to land a little more easily. And you know, it's so cool to me how. Well, I said, look, you guys, I don't know what I'm here for. You know, I've lived here all my life. You guys just got here from all sorts of different countries and places in the world, and this is all new to you, and the climate is new, and I just suggested one way to really get into the joint is go camping. Go look at the stars. Go have a campfire. You know, go jump in a lake. Go sit by a river somewhere, and you know, just do that. Just the land and the stories that the land holds, and the experience I had on. You know, I grew up in Western Canada, so I grew up with parents who camped and took me out into the outside, and I'm of the generation where, Mom, I'm bored, go outside. But that's damn good advice, if you ask me. Damn good advice. Go outside and get on the land. Get on the land. I don't think there's any peace or solace equivalent to that which I get when I shut the car off and it's dead quiet outside. Dead quiet. And you just have to go, listen to that. Holy crap, that's loud. Yeah, that's silence.
The loudness of silence.
It's a beautiful thing. And you know, you plunge into a city and you're plunged into the hubbub and the fray of human noise and interaction. And, you know, of course you have to manage that. But I think, you know, new Canadians, go out and go camping.
Or anyone, really. There's a lot of quote unquote old Canadians who can't appreciate that, in part because our world today, especially growing up, doesn't provide for that. It's not about that. Your world is contained on a phone, which can show you what it looks like to be in the wilderness, and I guess that's good enough. And until you can hear the loudness of silence, why wouldn't that be good enough? How do you know? It's again that idea that you had originally of the three-dimensional object crossing a two-dimensional line. How can you appreciate what it is until you're in the three-dimensional space? Because on my phone it looks pretty, that's fine. It's Instagrammed, it's done. Yeah. Andy, I think that's actually a good way to wrap it up.
Ben, what a pleasure, man. You know, songs, earphones, and gear, I'll do this anytime with you. Just have a conversation.
Let's do it.
I really appreciate this.
Me too. Andy, thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you, my friend.
To learn more about Andy Curtis, go to the website whatonearthisgoingon.ca. There you can find all previous episodes, and if you don't mind, please give me a rating on whatever podcast app that you use, including Apple Podcasts. Now, your quote of the week is, of course, from Samuel Beckett. It's a pretty famous quote. You might have heard it before, but it has some deeper meaning than what you might think, and I'd encourage you to look up the quote. Here goes. Ever tried, ever failed, no matter. Try again, fail better. Thanks as always to our wonderful composer Andrea Wetstein for the music, and special thanks for this episode to the Grand Theatre in Calgary for giving us a chance to record in their space. Next week we're chatting with Queen's Professor Lee Ayrton about gender, gender politics, and their book, Gender, Your Guide. I'll see you then.